Today I want to share with you how to make sauerkraut soup. This is a great recipe for using up the last little bit of your winter batch of fermented cabbage. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nourishing foods like bone broth, ferments, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning how to be a modern pioneer in the kitchen, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. If at any time you want to jump ahead in this video, be sure to check the timestamps in the description or in the pinned comment. I'll also have a link there to the printable recipe. Here in the Texas Hill Country, we have a charming little diner called the Bluebonnet Cafe, and they serve sauerkraut soup, and it's really delicious. And the funny thing about it is, I had never heard about it until I moved here, but once I tried it, I was hooked, and you will be too. Now there are so many variations of this recipe because this is true home cooking at its best. This was popularized here in the Hill Country by German immigrants who came here in the 1800s. But many immigrants have their own family version, as well as many families in Eastern Europe have versions of this as well. So know that no matter what way you make sauerkraut soup, you can't go wrong, you can't make a mistake, put your own spin on it. Now, many recipes for sauerkraut soup call for adding bratwurst or some type of meat. Now, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is use potatoes. And potatoes were often used in sauerkraut soup during very lean times when budgets were really tight or food was very limited, but there were potatoes. And given that we're going through very tight budget times these days, I thought it would be a good thing to use potatoes instead of bratwurst. We're going to make this very budget friendly. So you're going to need about 1.5 cups of your fermented cabbage. Now, if you don't make homemade fermented cabbage as homemade sauerkraut, if you don't make homemade sauerkraut, don't worry about it. If you buy sauerkraut at the store, you can also use that in this recipe. And you're going to want about 2 medium potatoes. I've got 3 here only because these little guys were on the small side. And then you're just going to want 1 onion diced. Plus, you're going to need 6 cups of some type of liquid. What I've got here is chicken bone broth, but you can also just use a simple chicken broth, or if you want to keep this more vegetarian, you can definitely use a vegetable broth. And I have 3 really great recipes for you for broths that are alternatives to meat-based broths like this one. I'll be sure to link to all the recipes that I mention in the description underneath this video, as well as the pinned comment. I've got 2 very easy to make yet very mineral rich vegetable broths. So those are a wonderful alternative to a chicken broth or a chicken bone broth in this recipe. I also share with you a recipe for something called golden broth. And this is sort of a mock chicken broth. It looks yellow, it has a very similar taste to chicken broth, and I think you'll love it. And that's definitely something that you can use in this recipe if you want to keep things vegetarian, because it is a vegetarian option. And I'll be sure to link to that recipe below. You're also going to need a tablespoon of some type of fat to saute up your onions and your potatoes in. I really like using butter in this recipe, but certainly other traditional fats would be welcome, like a lard or a tallow or an olive oil. Also, a few optional ingredients that you'll want to consider adding into your sauerkraut soup are paprika. You can use the sweet or the smoky, whatever you like, some crushed caraway seeds, and a little bit of vinegar. I've got the homemade apple cider vinegar here. But these are optional. However, I do recommend that you try them at least once. Well, I'm going to put my heat on to medium, and I'm going to start to melt my butter, and then we'll go ahead and throw in our onions. Now, when you go to peel your onion, always remember, don't throw out your onion skins. Save them in your scrap bag for when you make bone broth. Now the potatoes I have here are Yukon Golds. They work very well in this soup. You can really use any type of potato that you like, and if it has a very thin skin, you're welcome to leave the skin on, but I really like this soup better with the potatoes peeled. Now don't throw away your potato skins. because these are wonderful for simmering in a little bit of water, and then let the water cool, and then use that, what I call fortified water, to feed your sourdough starter, because the little bit of starch that'll be in these potato peels will be very attractive as food to your yeast and the good bacteria that you want to proliferate in your sourdough starter. So be sure to save these. You can just put them in a scrap bag if you don't need water at this time to feed your sourdough starter. As I said, just throw them in a scrap bag, put them in your freezer, and when you do go to feed your sourdough starter, just simmer these in a little bit of water, just enough water to cover. Simmer them for about 10 minutes or so, and then strain out the peels and let the water cool, and then go ahead and feed your starter. Now all we're going to do is slice these into about 1-inch cubes. Now once you've got your butter melted, or whatever fat you're using melted and heated up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in our onion. And then we're going to go ahead and add in our potatoes. Now you just want to mix up your onions and your potatoes in that little bit of melted, in my case, butter, and have the onions soften up a bit. What's nice about this, putting the potatoes and the onions together, the onions will soften and the potato will release a little starch and mix with your fat, which in essence makes sort of like a little bit of a mock roux that'll help keep that fat well dispersed through your soup and not pooling on top. But just give this about 5 minutes or so, just to let those onions soften. I actually had to turn my heat down to low, but every cooktop is different, so maybe on your cooktop about a medium, but just periodically stir it. You don't want any browning to take place. You just want the onions to soften nicely. Now once your onions look softened and a little bit glistening, you want to go ahead and add in your liquid. And I'm going ahead and I'm going to add in 6 cups of my chicken bone broth. I like to use bone broth because it helps make everything a little more nutritious. Now I'm going to bring this up to a boil, and the minute it comes up to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a low simmer and let it simmer until the potatoes are tender. This may take maybe 10-15 minutes given they're 1-inch cubes, and you can just check them periodically. Once you can put a knife through, you'll know that they're softened. So once your soup comes up to a boil, you want to go ahead and turn the heat down to low and put the lid on and let this simmer until those potatoes are tender. And I would recommend checking them at about 10 minutes, but it may take 15 minutes to soften them. While the soup is simmering, I just want to go ahead and take a 1/2 teaspoon of caraway seeds and put them in the mortar here and give them a little crush with the pestle. And the reason that I like to do this is whole caraway seeds in the soup are not particularly palatable. It's easy to get them stuck in your teeth and whatnot. But if you give them a little bit of a crush, it also helps release their oils and imparts a lovely flavor into the soup, and also just helps to break them up. Now, if you are not familiar with caraway seeds, I highly recommend giving them a try in the soup at least once. I think you're going to find that it's really delicious. You may be familiar with caraway seeds if you've had rye bread. Sometimes rye bread is made with caraway seeds, and sometimes it's not. But they just have a wonderful fragrance and a wonderful flavor. So I'm just going to crush those up a little and set them aside. Now, you can also go ahead and add some paprika to this soup, and then you can even sprinkle a little on top as well for some color. I usually start with just 1/4 teaspoon, and I like the sweet as opposed to the smoked, but you can certainly add more. But we'll go ahead and add that along with the sauerkraut after the potatoes soften. Well, after about 10 minutes, I checked on my potatoes and I inserted the tip of a knife into one of them, and it went in very easily, so they're nice and softened. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put in a little bit of the paprika. And as I said, I generally like to just start with a 1/4 teaspoon, but you can certainly add more. Alrighty, I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle that 1/4 teaspoon right on top, and then I'll get ready to go ahead and add in my little bit of somewhat pulverized caraway seeds. So I just stirred that around a little to incorporate the paprika and the caraway seeds, and now I'm going to go ahead and just add in this sauerkraut. Now you may be wondering, first of all, I want to mention I do have a video and a printable recipe where I show you how to make homemade sauerkraut, and I'll be sure to link to that. And you may be wondering why I never added any salt into this soup. And the reason is, since this is a fermented cabbage, which when you ferment cabbage, then it's called sauerkraut, and you use quite a bit of salt when you make a ferment. And so I don't want to add any additional salt until I have a chance to taste this. Now I'm just going to stir this to incorporate all of the sauerkraut into the soup, and all we need to do is just heat it through to where the sauerkraut is now warm, and that literally can take 30 seconds to a minute, no more than that. Now I'm going to give this a taste test, and we'll see if it needs any additional seasoning. Now, you may be wondering why I have the apple cider vinegar out here. And the reason is, if you like your sauerkraut soup to have more of a tang than the sauerkraut is giving it, you can always just start by adding in a teaspoon, maybe up to a tablespoon of the apple cider vinegar into your soup. But often if you have like a homemade fermented sauerkraut, homemade fermented cabbage that's now sauerkraut, chances are it's probably got a nice tang to it. Oh, that's delicious. And yes, that does not need any vinegar. It's got the perfect tang. Well, now let's plate this up. Well, I put a sprinkling of extra crushed caraway seeds on top of here, and then another sprinkling of some extra paprika. Now on my spoon, I've got some of the sauerkraut and some of the potato along with the broth, so let's give it a taste and see how it is. Oh, that's delicious. You're gonna love this. Now, if you'd like more budget-friendly pantry meals, be sure to click on this video over here where I have a whole playlist showing you how to make easy, inexpensive meals in a matter of minutes. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country Kitchen. Love and God bless.